Good day everyone, I am Michael, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Grievances and Complaints 2024, Ensuring Hospitals Compliance with the CMS CoPs, Joint Commission, DNV Standards and OCR. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our presenter for today, Jason BSJDRN CPH, who was COPEX Director for Facility Patient Safety and Risk Management and Operation from 2014 to 2020, and a registered nurse diploma from St. Luke's School Professional Nursing, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Laura.
Okay, and thank you, everyone. As Michael mentioned, what we're talking about today is grievances and complaints. So we put those two together because CMS calls them one thing and Joint Commission calls them something else. So that's why I always say grievances and complaints as opposed to being redundant. Now I'm going to just do a brief overview of why we are here today. And that is, of course, those of you who have gone through a state survey, you never want to get one of these. That is the Statement of Deficiencies and Plan of Correction. How does this all work? The regulation starts in the Federal Register. And then you want to make sure you have the most recent manual. I want to talk briefly on deficiency reports. So the topics we're talking about today for Appendix A, acute hospitals, these are the grievances. All right, let's go ahead and start with the conditions of participation for acute hospitals. The patient rights section is really where all of this is contained within Manual A. This applies to all acute hospitals that take Medicare and Medicaid payments. We are expected to take steps to find out if the patient has a representative. I want to just touch briefly on your incapacitated patient. State laws, you definitely want to follow anything. That's why I urge you to consult with your counsel. Other required notices. Another one happens to be what's called the IM notice, which simply means an important message from Medicare. That's all it means. Next tag number, grievance process. So here we are now. You have to have a way to promptly resolve any grievance that a patient has. A formal or informal written or verbal complaint about patient care that cannot be resolved at the time that the complaint was presented to a staff member. So again, just to reiterate, there's a difference between a grievance and a minor request. So if the patient is satisfied, but the representative's not, it's not a grievance. Billing, again, generally not a grievance unless it addresses quality of care. If it's telephoned in, it's still a grievance. The patient just flat out says, I want this treated as a grievance, it's a grievance. Now, if the patient said it's not, then follow their wishes, document it. So as far as the process, again, if it's resolved at the time, it's not a grievance. Part of your process, you also have to have a way to resolve it and a prompt resolution of these grievances. The governing board, by the way, they have a responsibility in here because they have to make sure that, first off, your whole hospital is operating. The board must review and resolve grievances unless they have delegated in writing. Committee must be more than one person. The surveyor is going to make sure the governing board has approved the process. Another area we need to look for is timely. These are beneficiary, family-centered, quality care-centered QIOs. They talk about complaints, they review them, and they also do quality of care reviews along with EMTALA and other case reviews. Here's just an example. This clear procedure, we have to have a way. The interpretive guidelines say usually within 7 days. The surveyor wants to see your timeframes. We will respond to your complaint within 7 calendar days. So you need to have a little bit more information. So in the written notice, again, communicated in a way and a manner these folks can understand. Again, if the patient emails, fine. You can email back. What about resolution? What do you have to do? You're not required to include anything, any statement that could be taken as legal action in that response. So that's a very broad term. Critical access hospital, I want to talk briefly. It's actually in your swing bed. CMS, the grievance conditions I talked about don't apply to a critical access, but you must do something when a patient does complain. And the most that come up in your manual are in 1612. All right, I'm going to now go on to Joint Commission. Again, they call it complaint, and it's in the right section. Joint Commission calls them complaint CMS grievance. So the patient family have a right to have them reviewed. These complaints are reviewed, they're resolved, and when possible, when you can resolve them. Now be aware, you may have to also under Joint Commission, as with CMS, you have to give that person written notice of your decision. You know, your time frame, you determine the time frame for doing that. Now, they don't. Here's just some other suggestions. All right, what about the patient who files a lawsuit? Now we're over to DNV. DNV is Del Norte Virus. I'm sorry, Del Norte Veritas. That process has to include a referral to quality of care like QIO. As far as definitions, they use the same as CMS. You have to follow the same procedure and refer those Medicare patient concerns to the QIO. The surveyor will verify you have a policy and procedure overall. You have to give enough information to the patient. I want to talk about telemedicine complaints because they do split these up within DNV. It's called Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. They have a patient rights section. This section prevents and prohibits discrimination based upon those very special situations. The 2020 rule that repealed it, pregnancy-related condition, termination, gender identity, this all fell under the definition of sex. We also have to make sure patients have auxiliary aids to help with them. So I've just got some examples of what are those auxiliary aids. One other thing you have to do, and it dovetails off with patient rights, we have to train all of your staff. All right, 2 other laws that you have to do. Unwritten grievances, Title II, Title IX. A patient has to file a grievance. That's not enough. They need to put more. I've got the information. That's the link. OCR has a portal on their site on how they can do it, but just some key takeaways for you here. Give information to your patients. What are your rights? How do you file a grievance? Do it on admission. They may never have one, but at least you've met your requirement. Don't forget their representatives, especially if they're incapacitated or incompetent. Train staff. What is a grievance? What do you do? Who do you notify? Keep your governing board informed of those grievances. So Michael, thank you for your assistance with this, and I'll turn it back to you for any closing comments. And just as a final remark, Health and Human Services and Department of Justice, if you were impacted by that terrible hacking ransomware, just be aware they are taking action on that. So thank you, everyone. I'm glad that the weather did hold up for me, and I want to thank you for your participation and attendance. And thank you, Michael.
Once again, thank you, Laura, for the great presentations. And so that does conclude the session for today. Thank you, everyone, for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.